We're dealing with something that's unknown. It's unseen. We don't even know how deadly this is, how it's being spread. We've never dealt with anything on this scale right now. I feel like we're on a plane flying in a fog with no instruments.
From Los Angeles, this is Code 3, the Firefighters Podcast, hosted by award-winning journalist Scott Orr. Code 3 features interviews with leading members of the fire service, discussing firefighting strategy, tactics, and other topics you need to know more about. Now, here's Scott.
That's right, and I will not let Parkinson stop me. I'm back. Thank you for being with me here on Code 3. You are once again listening to the show for and about firefighters. You can stick around till the end if you want to know where I've been. Now let's get started. By now, as I record this show on April 6, 2020, most of this nation's fire departments are already dealing with the devastating effects of COVID-19 to one degree or another. But if you think your department's been hit hard, be glad you're not in New York City. Just as it was on September 11, 2001, ground zero for COVID-19 is New York. The FDNY is dealing with an enormous number of deaths among the public. So many runs that they no longer transport patients in cardiac arrest unless they can get a pulse while they're in the field. The radio calls for 1037s, which can mean a dead body, are frequent, constant, 12 an hour by some accounts. Amid all this, nearly 2,000 FDNY personnel are suspected to be infected. About 400 are confirmed, and that number is growing daily. Joining me to give us some perspective is FDNY Battalion Chief Danny Sheridan. He is a 34-year veteran of the department and a member of the FDNY IMT as well. He's also a well-known instructor nationally. He's a lead instructor with Mutual Aid Training Group, which works to train firefighters in Latin America. Danny, thanks for joining me again on Code 3 today.
You're welcome, Scott. My pleasure to be here.
Let's start with the big picture. How has life changed for you these days?
How has life changed? Well, quite honestly, it was very subtle, At first, it was in another place, right? I had been doing a lot of traveling. I was actually down in Chile, doing some training down in Chile, and then I had some consulting work in Australia, and it was starting to hit over in China, I guess. And it was like, you know how it is. When you see something on the news, it's always somewhere else. It's not in my backyard, right? So
yeah, and so you say, well, that's too bad for them, but they'll get through it.
Yeah, they'll get through it, and like everything else, it'll hit its peak and fizzle out like everything else. I have to be honest, it was just very subtle. Then we started seeing it happening in Italy, and then it went to Spain, and then it went to the UK, and even here in New York City, we're such a cosmopolitan city where we're like the center of the universe. Sometimes we have every nationality. It's like the hub of the world, people from all over. I mean, I couldn't even imagine how many languages are spoken in New York. I think it's like everything, we always assume that things will just come and go and, kind of fizzle out, right? Quite the opposite. I mean, it just very, very subtly just started creeping up to the point where like all of a sudden we were like in the midst of it. And I can remember the date. I think it was March 19th. Well, that's when we kicked off our new work schedule, March 19th. Maybe a week before that, I'm on the IMT for the FDNY. I'm in the operations section. They called us in, and we were going to set up these testing sites in every borough. And then all of a sudden, it came and went, and we decided not to do the testing sites. But at the same time, the hospitals just started getting overwhelmed. And, in 1995, we started doing EMS, right? We were, my first 10 years on the job, we didn't even touch a patient, I used to kind of joke around and say, if someone had a heart attack and they fell in front of the firehouse, it'd be better off if they fell, across the street in front of the bodega. It just, you're just busy with fire. We never really, it wasn't an arrogance. It was just, it didn't exist, Health and Hospital Corporation did EMS, and FDNY, we did fires, and we had enough fires to keep us busy, right? But anyway, fast forward 20 years, and now our engine companies are CFRD, Certified First Responders, and we were just getting bombarded, and we couldn't even handle the workload anymore. It's nonstop. I mean, I come to work and, that's all you hear on the radio. It seems to be anytime I put the radio on, it's nonstop. We have a code, right? It's a 1037. Code 2, which means that they're doing CPR. And if they give a 1099, that means that they're going to be out of service for at least a half hour. And that is constant. It's like just nonstop around the clock now. That's what's happened.
Now, I understand that there's been at least an informal policy change that you guys no longer transport cardiac cases if they're not viable.
Correct. That's correct, yeah. I think the engine companies and the EMTs, and they're the ones that are on the front lines, and they're the ones that are getting shellacked, and it's really my job as a battalion chief to keep them safe the best I can and to manage everything else, right? That's the job of an incident commander. I'm concerning myself now with, keeping the firehouses clean, disinfected, safe, trying to minimize the exposures.
Yeah, just when we got good at cleaning up after ourselves to prevent carcinogens, this happened.
Exactly. That's a great point, yeah. And this takes it to a whole new level. So I have conferences with my captains. I have 6 captains in my battalion, and we have a conference call pretty much like every other night. And, we talk about, what's happening in the field and on the front lines. And
what are they telling you?
That they're getting clobbered now. I have 3 of my engines are very busy, especially one of them in Soundview, 96 engine, and actually 64 engine too. They both have very large response areas. And they have a elderly population. They have some nursing homes. We're really trying to stay on top of having enough PPE. It sounds like it's trivial, but one of my biggest jobs, every day, is just making sure they have enough N95s. I have to keep track of every run that they go on and make sure that that they don't get caught short, because if they do, I can't expose these guys to the coronavirus.
So how are your PPE supplies holding out?
Yeah, for now, knock on wood, we've been able to keep up with the demand. Every time they do a CPR run, they were losing 3 or 4 N95s. So I have to constantly make sure that they have an adequate supply on the apparatus. We did come up with a plan B, which I don't think we've instituted yet, but we figured if it really hits the fan and they absolutely have no N95s, it's not acceptable to use whatever other masks are out there. So what I did was in my battalion, I have a depot of about 12 spare SCBAs. So I gave each of the engine companies 2 SCBAs. So that gives them 2 there, and then they have one probably has a chauffeur, and they have an extra one on the rig, so that's a total of 4. And, if they actually, at a necessity, if they have no N95s, then I told them to wear the SCBAs. That's actually plan B right now,
Don't you have to decontaminate those between every run?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's going to be an extra step.
Yep, but that's fine. I'd rather that than expose these guys. But in essence, they're going to have SCBAs for firefighting, and then these SCBAs will be dedicated solely for CPR runs.
So how is staffing? I hear you guys are having trouble with that.
Yeah, my battalion right now, we're holding our own. It's averaging about 4 to 6 firefighters in each company are out with symptoms. I think only right now in my battalion, I believe only 2 or 3 have tested positive for the virus. And I think 2 of one officer and 1 firefighter's wives tested positive. So, we're erring on the side of caution if we're telling guys if they're symptomatic, if they're coughing or if they're feverish or chills or whatever, just to stay home. We're not bringing them into the station.
Which is, of course, the safe way to do it. So are these guys worried? Are they concerned about having to go out on these runs?
That's a good question. I would say that they're concerned. They're not thrilled about it, but, being who they are, they always step up. I told them, we got through 9/11. This is, in a sense, I think of 9/11 because in a sense it's a disaster or whatever you want to call it, a crisis or extraordinary times. And we got through 9/11, but 9/11, it was kind of a finite event. I mean, it happened. The buildings fell. We had to go down to the pile and recover our brothers.
But then it was over. And, there was contaminants, but I don't think we were as aware or cognizant of back then of the dangers that were going to come. So, it was kind of contained though. Like, you go down and work on the pile, you go back to the firehouse and you take a shower, you clean up, you leave your clothes at the firehouse and that's it. But now we're dealing with something that's unknown. It's unseen. We don't even know how deadly this is, how it's being spread. My daughter's she works in the medical field. She's a PA and she's home with us now. And she's like the other extreme. She's hypervigilant because I think, when you know too much, I guess sometimes ignorance is bliss, but she's very dialed in on what's happening, and she's very concerned, and she says it's extremely contagious. So, this is new territory for us. I mean, we've never dealt with anything on this scale. I mean, there's nowhere that's safe. Like, you can't even say, well, we'll take a trip somewhere and maybe until this blows over. It's like it's the whole world. How has this situation with COVID-19 changed morale, if it has at all?
No, I don't think morale is down. I think maybe the opposite. I think guys, they're the best. The FDNY. I mean, they always come up to the challenge. They're really conscientious guys. I mean, I have some great captains in my battalion, and they're not going to make excuses, and they're going to do what they can to make the lives of the citizens in New York better. That's what they signed up for, and that they adhere to it. I'm not surprised. I mean, I really don't expect anything less from my guys.
This is not the same thing as a structure fire, though. I mean, there you arrive, you have the red stuff, you put the wet stuff on it, you overhaul it, you go home. This is invisible, and it's got to be scary to even veterans who know what they're doing, that something could kill them if they can't even see.
Right. Yeah, we're like in uncharted waters here. I mean, it's just, God, I don't know. This is something that I never could even foresee. Even though, we've seen news reports over the years that there's going to be this pandemic, and I don't know. I mean, I guess the reality is different than, when you see these prophecies or whatever you want to call them about these pandemics. But when it's really happening, it's just very difficult to describe, because what's for me is scary in a way is that I can't see the end of this. I don't know where it is. Like right now, I feel like we're on a plane flying in a fog with no instruments. Like we just don't know where it's going to peak and where it's going to level off and where it's going to be the downturn. It seems to me that it just keeps going. Like with 9/11, with the Trade Center, we knew, as every time we went down to the pile, we made progress. We dug up another 10 feet or whatever it was, and we knew we were getting towards the bottom. This is the unknown. I mean, it's just, I don't know how to describe it. It's something that I've never dealt with, never even thought of dealing with,
So when you wake up and go to work, what are you thinking?
Well, what am I thinking? Right. What's going to happen today? It seems to change. Every day it seems to be changing. It goes from day to day. You keep thinking to yourself, like, today's the day where it's going to be less cases and there's not going to be that many, they're going to say that we're on the downturn and it's easing up, and it doesn't seem to be happening. It just seems to be like, okay, it's actually getting busier. what's the breaking point for us? When's going to be the point where, where we just can't handle the volume anymore and the volume of people, and what do we do with them,
Do you feel like any of your people are going to suffer from problems like PTSD related to this down the road, and what can we do about that now to help mitigate it?
Yeah, good question. I would imagine, that's going to happen because, personally speaking, I remember on 9/11, I did things and I saw things that I didn't think that I would ever see. And you just do them, and you do it without thinking. And then you think about it much later on. Like I can remember when I was a probie, and I couldn't have had no more than maybe 2 months in the firehouse, and we had a call for an explosion in a power plant. We were second due truck, and I had the can as usual, and I was the Johnny, and I worked with the one guy had the irons. He was a Vietnam vet, and my captain, he was like he was the most saltiest guy, man. He was like been through the war years, and I remember going in, and we got to the landing on the second floor, and there was a guy that was in really bad shape, and I kind of stepped over him like, because we still had to get to the fire, and I stepped over him like I've been doing it my whole life. And then, when we got to the fire, the captain told me, he says, "Okay, kid, get the can," and then, put the fire out. And I started putting the fire out, and he said, "This is a person." And I was like, I acted like it was no big deal. Like, yeah, okay, I got back to the firehouse, and the Vietnam vet, Frankie, he's like, looked at me, goes, "Sheridan, man, you're okay, man. You did okay there, And he didn't realize that when I got home that night or the next night or whatever it was, I was ready to jump out the window, man. I was jumping out of my skin. So guys, if it's anything like myself, we'll put up some bravado. And but I did talk to one of my aides. He's an EMT, and he worked on one of the we call them the RRVs. And I was thinking about actually having someone I know maybe volunteer. And he says, "You don't want to do this duty. It's depressing. It's just one dead body after another." I don't know. I think firefighters are tough, man. They and the EMTs are tough. They'll put up the brave front, but I don't know what happens. You're right. When it all settles, what's gonna happen?
You guys at FDNY have a great reputation for being able to stand up to a challenge.
Yeah. I have no doubts. We like you said, we always seem to rise to the occasion. We'll get through it. I just don't know when the end is. That's all.
All right, Danny Sheridan, thanks for talking with me on Code 3. Good luck in the coming days.
Thank you. Take care now.
Danny is justifiably concerned. The risk is real, and frankly, it's scary. I'd like to have your comments on what you're seeing. Call my voicemail line at 562-337-9902, and I'll use your comments in a future show. That's 562-337-9902. Or you can leave your comments on our website at code3podcast.com/COVID. There's links to more resources there as well. So, where have I been? I appreciate the messages of concern I've received. Parkinson's is a tough disease, and as a neurologist once told me, it won't kill you, but it'll make your life hell. That's turning out to be true. But I love doing this show for you, so I'm back and I'll continue to produce it. But I am cutting back to one episode a week. I'll publish it on Thursdays. Same content, just a little less of it. That should make it possible for me to keep going well into the future. If you like what you hear, please go tell someone. And thank you for being a fan. Alright, that's it. That's all for this edition of Code 3. I'll be back next time with more, and I hope you'll join me then. I'm Scott Orr, and until then, stay safe.
To contact us, get more information on today's show, or to subscribe to the podcast, go to code3podcast.com.